The New Orleans Saints have officially begun to lay the groundwork to find their quarterback of the future. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode, we're taking a look at Spencer Rattler, the New Orleans Saints selecting him in the 5th round at pick 150. Could he be the future quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, or better yet, the quarterback of the future for the team? We're going to take a look at where it is that he'll be expected to grow, what it is that he already does well, and why the New Orleans Saints were so interested in him for so long. And of course, we're going to kick it all off with taking a look at where the expectations should be for Spencer Rattler coming into his rookie season and beyond, because I do think that keeping the expectations reasonable will allow him to better be able to exceed those expectations in the long run. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day here on the Locked On Saints podcast. And a big thank you to all of our new listeners, viewers, audience, and everything here as well. The New Orleans Saints just had a 7-person draft class, a 15-person undrafted free agency class. So we might have a lot of new folks coming in to hear more and coming along with some of their favorite players that are now New Orleans Saints. And we appreciate you very much for being here and hope that you'll enjoy the show enough to stick around and become an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I've got a competitive side, and my competitive side is absolutely in love with Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends today and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store and Google Play. So I want to start off here with taking a look at where the expectations around Spencer Rattler should be, because I do think that keeping them reasonable makes sense and is probably fair to Spencer Rattler. But it's clear that the New Orleans Saints are continuing to roll the dice here to find their quarterback of the future. Let's be real. Even if Derek Carr signs a second contract with the New Orleans Saints and shows out over the course of the next year, next couple of years, which would require good performances from Derek Carr and, to be honest, good performances from the New Orleans Saints and their new offense as well, you're going to see maybe an additional year, an additional 2 years. You're kind of at that point in Derek Carr's career, and we know the impatience of the NFL, particularly when it comes to the quarterback position. If they've got a guy waiting in the wings, they'd rather give the guy waiting in the wings, on a rookie contract on a 5th round pick rookie contract scale as well, by the way, the reins, so that they can continue to build the offense around and kind of build the nest around the quarterback, then continue to rely on the aging veteran quarterback. We see that all the time around the league. So when it comes to Spencer Rattler, he is in a position where he could work himself into being the future. And I think that that's one of the things that has been wise about the New Orleans Saints approach to quarterback over the course of the last couple of drafts. Traded up last year for Jake Haener. They ended up moving for, or didn't even have to move. They stood pat at 150 and landed Spencer Rattler this year. However you feel about the quarterback, for instance, I came into the draft not really looking at Spencer Rattler as an option for New Orleans. I was more focused in on guys like Jordan Travis. Now, Jordan Travis, of course, was coming off of an injury. The Saints were very cautious about medicals coming into this one. Even Kool-Aid, who's coming off of that foot injury, is like very, very minor and not expected to be a big deal at all. And so the Saints clearly liked Spencer Rattler, and they're not the only ones. Dane Brugler, a guy that I trust very much when it comes to his NFL draft rankings and his prospect rankings and everything like that, had Spencer Rattler listed as a top 100 prospect. He had him as the 72nd overall prospect with a 3rd round grade, and the Saints drafted him more than twice the amount of picks later at 150. Our friend Damian Parson over at the Locked On NFL Draft podcast praised Spencer Rattler all throughout the draft process, saying this isn't the same 17-year-old kid that you saw on a Netflix special or in a Netflix docuseries. This is new. He's not even the same guy that you saw at Oklahoma. So I trust all of those people, and I'm looking at Spencer Rattler with fresh eyes here. I took some time to watch all of his tape and everything like that, and I think he's got a lot of tools that I could see the New Orleans Saints absolutely loving, and certainly is a fit for a Shanahan-style offense. I think we've always known that. Really good and play action, play fake, stuff like that. We're going to take a look at where he's strongest here in a little bit, but I want to focus on the expectations here for a moment, because the New Orleans Saints should be taking swings to figure out who their quarterback of the future is. They have their quarterback for now, but who's the guy moving forward? And look, Dennis Allen was even really clear about that, right? He said he's really pleased with where the quarterback room sits. He's very pleased about the starting quarterback that they have in Derek Carr. And he also mentioned, though, that they're really, really excited about the developmental prospects that they have at quarterback as well. And he lumped Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler both into that conversation with the plural prospects there, the S at the end. But I genuinely believe that the ceiling of Jake Haener is closer to the floor of Spencer Rattler. I think that Spencer Rattler is a whole different type of prospect and a better fit for this system, and somebody that was drafted by the guys that are implementing the new offensive system. That's not the case for Jake Haener. Jake Haener was drafted by the previous regime. Yes, Dennis Allen was the head coach, but the offense and entire offensive staff, offensive coordinator, gone. Quarterback coach, gone. Offensive assistants that would have had something to do with the quarterback, gone. All new guys. And now all the new guys, the new offensive coordinator, the new offensive assistants, the new quarterback coach, they were a part in selecting Spencer Rattler in this year's draft, which I think tells you a lot. So you get a guy that was a number one recruit going into college, was immediately tagged as a guy that could be the number one overall selection in the draft when he was set to come out. And that was an early projection from his Oklahoma days and things like that. And those expectations ended up being too lofty. Don't replicate that here in New Orleans. Give him the reasonable expectations of sitting back for a couple of years, probably, behind Derek Carr, learning the system, working with Klint Kubiak, learning and progressing and developing under Andrew Janocko, and then see where things go. And I think that that's the best case scenario here for the New Orleans Saints, is that they can have Rattler sit back for a year or two before they even get to the points where they turn over the offense to him. But I also think that he's a guy that you could put out there in a pinch and he could still seal a game for you if you needed to, just based on his natural ability and things like that. Again, we're going to get to what it is that he does best here in a little bit. But one of the things that I do want to mention is the New Orleans Saints have never shown, at least in the modern era, right? Thinking 2006 and beyond, their golden years, have never shown an ability to be able to develop a quarterback that they drafted, right? Garrett Grayson, it didn't work out. Tommy Stevens was a little bit of a different situation. They didn't really draft him to be a quarterback. They drafted him to be the next Taysom Hill, to be a tight end. That also didn't work. Taysom Hill is probably the best developmental prospect that they ever had, even just strictly at the quarterback position, but they didn't draft him. They went out and got him off of a practice squad from Green Bay. Ian Book, of course, that didn't work out. Jake Haener, the expectations were never really that he would develop into a starting quarterback. It was always that he would be a really, really good backup quarterback behind Derek Carr, who speaks the same language because Derek Carr has been his mentor for years. But Spencer Rattler is the first real developmental potential future starter, future quarterback that the Saints have really had with the recent regime, and certainly with this new regime of coaches that can show that they are developers. So when we look at the Saints' past in developing quarterbacks and the lack of success in that, I don't think that we can transition that to the expectations of the staff that they have right now, because it's an entirely new staff that's going to be developing this talent, who has a pretty good upside, pretty good level of upside when it comes to Rattler. So let's take a look at why that upside is there. And then we'll get to where things are going to be expected to progress, because there's a little bit of both, right? It's not a perfect prospect here. Nobody is. But let's start with where things do look good when it comes to Rattler transitioning to what the New Orleans Saints anticipate being in 2024. We got all that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now you can bet on a ton when it comes to FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. You can also get in on a lot of NFL draft props as well for these new rookies. Caleb Williams, of course, is the top odds-on favorite at plus 210 for Offensive Rookie of the Year. LSU quarterback and Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels, third place behind Marvin Harrison Jr. at plus 1,000. We're discussing Spencer Rattler here today, plus 8,000 for his, plus 2,500. When it comes to Kool-Aid McKinstry, though, when it comes to defensive rookie of the year. So there's a ton for you to get in on, including over and unders for passing yards for rookies and everything like that as well. So there is so much to get in on over at FanDuel. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon today and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends at Game Time, my #1 spot to go for tickets for all events, whether I'm looking at sports, whether I'm looking at theater, concerts, comedy, and even more. There's a ton to check out over at Game Time. Of course, the New Orleans Pelicans set to get swept this evening by the Oklahoma City Thunder. Maybe they get one at home, get a little bit of a gentleman's sweep. So you want to take your chance if you're in the city of New Orleans to check out maybe the one playoff win that the New Orleans Pelicans might get. You can do so right now. Game Time has lower level seats for $24, flash deals for $13, and you can even sit up in the upper level for like $6 on Game Time, and that's all in pricing. You can even see a view from your seats before you buy the tickets. It just doesn't get any better than Game Time. You can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets today for your NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. Some of Spencer Rattler's strengths are going to be overshadowed by the concerns around maturity and attitude. But I got to tell you, I think the strengths should overshadow the concerns about maturity and attitude, in my opinion. So let's break all of that down. I'm going to go into some of the things that Spencer Rattler does very, very well as we continue on with today's episode. Appreciate you very much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today as well to get the insight on some of the biggest NFL draft stories from the people that cover the team the most in every single day. Go and check it out on YouTube at Locked On Sports Today or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So look, a lot has been made of Spencer Rattler and the maturity questions around him and all those other things, thanks to the QB1 Beyond the Lights Netflix series that he did when he was like a senior in high school. And let's be real, he was like a 17, 18-year-old high school quarterback acting like a 17 or 18-year-old high school quarterback. Like, that's all that it was. I think that using that as a part of his evaluation right now is very unfair. This is a guy that saw a lot of kind of a tumultuous couple of years in Oklahoma. Things didn't go the way that people expected them to go when he was coming out as a #1 overall recruit, expected to be the #1 overall selection quickly once he left there, getting usurped effectively by Caleb Williams, who did end up being the #1 overall pick. Look, if you're going to get pushed out by anybody, you might as well get pushed out by the best prospect in, college football. Like, I don't think that's a knock on Spencer Rattler. I think that's more of a raising of the guard for Caleb Williams, who of course would eventually transfer away from Oklahoma. So didn't work out great for the Sooners in that case. But I think that when you look at his time over the course of his days in South Carolina, even watching sort of the turnover proneness that he had in 2022, counteracted by the way that he took care of the ball in 2024. He had 12 interceptions that he threw in 2022. That dropped to 8 in 2023. Same effective number of touchdowns, 18 in 2022. And then he also had 19 in 2023. But you saw him take care of the ball more. He had no fumbles go away, for instance, in 2023. And he was a team captain for those 2 years, which are voted on not only by the coaching staff that brought him in, but the players around him as well. So I think that tells you a little bit about everybody kind of co-signing, like, yeah, this guy has really taken a lot of steps forward. But I think that the game on the field should overshadow the conversations around maturation. And I think that there are going to be times, because Spencer Rattler has that tag and that it exists, that one of my favorite things that I consider a strength about him, just going through, I watched like 5 games of his last night and or between last night and me recording this. And I think one of the things that I love about him, that I really, really enjoy about him, that people are going to look at sideways because of that stupid Netflix special, is the fact that, like, I like his attitude. I like the fact that against Tennessee, when he dove in for a touchdown, he stood up and looked back at the Tennessee defensive back that couldn't stop him from getting in the end zone and let him know, yeah, I did that. I like the fact that when he gets a pass downfield into the hands of a quarterback, he's celebrating himself and turns around and celebrates the running back that made the block that allowed him to throw that pass. I like that. I like that he has that sort of mentality to let you know, yeah, me, I did that. I dig it. I'm all about that. I love a quarterback with that kind of attitude. Patrick Mahomes has that kind of attitude. Not the same player. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying the NFL's beloved gold standard at quarterback, marketing, commercials, all these other things, has that attitude. And no one bats an eye at it. But I promise you, the moment that Spencer Rattler shows out in a preseason game, let's say, and lets some, defensive back or some edge rusher that almost got there know, yeah, I did that. That's me. I'm him. I promise you he's going to get a litany of criticism. You will not hear that criticism from me. I want that in a quarterback. I want a quarterback that will stand up and say, I'm better than your defense. I'm better than your game plan. I want that in a quarterback. I love that in a quarterback. And I love that in a quarterback that will take that beyond just himself, but to his team. Yeah, we're them. We're that. You know what I mean? So I dig that. But I promise you he's going to get a ton of criticism the moment that he does something like that. You're not going to hear it here. The other thing that I do like about him is that he moves well. And he's got almost flawless mechanics in his throwing motion. Like, go and watch Michael Penix Jr. throw a pass and go and watch Spencer Rattler throw a pass, and the compact arm motion, what the offhand is doing, the wide base that's balanced when he delivers passes, when he throws. I know it was something that, if I remember correctly, I think Dane Brugler highlighted in his strengths as well. That's something that I really like as well, because that means that it's projectable. It's predictable what the quarterback will be able to do, right? When you have the technique, when you have the fundamentals, when you have the mechanics, then coaching and tweaking becomes about how do you take, you're not having to teach the basics to a guy like this, which I really, really like. I also like that he reads through defenses quickly and doesn't mind taking the short pass. One of the things that gives Caleb Williams any level of doubt by analysts, which could be just what it is, but as number one overall quarterback, people expect that could be a bust, all those other things. Caleb Williams is fantastic. But one of the concerns that's out there is that he's a deep ball guy that doesn't really operate as effectively in the short and intermediate areas of the field. That's not the case for Spencer Rattler. I would have liked to have seen his college tape attack the middle of the field a little bit more. It was very perimeter heavy, but I think that was a little bit more of a Dowell Loggins type offense. And really even the offensive coordinator before that too in 2022, because it didn't change a ton when Loggins took over. But like Loggins is a guy that was an NFL guy his entire career. So you also see him, kind of give that standard to Spencer Rattler and all that as well. So I do like that. I like his ability to be able to move as well, buy time. And I like that oftentimes when you watch his tape, yeah, there are moments where he's got designed runs, keepers, things like that he can run to where he does take off downfield. But then there's other times where his eyes are downfield as he's buying that time. Like he uses his legs to give him the opportunity to pass as opposed to using his legs strictly to get the opportunity to run. Ian Book defaulted to running a little bit too much. You saw that during this Senior Bowl. You saw it during his time in Notre Dame. You saw that during the preseason, all those other things. I like that that's different here for Spencer Rattler. And the last thing that I'll mention is that when you think about him fitting into a Shanahan-style wide zone offense, or Kubiak's version of that, there's going to be a lot of play action. There's going to be a lot of misdirection, going to be a lot of keepers, going to be a lot of those types of things. His play fake ability is fantastic. He sells the ever-loving whatever out of that. And I I think that that's a good fit. He also orchestrated a defense, both Lincoln Riley's defense and Loggins' defense, that incorporated a lot more eye candy, window dressing, pre-snap movement, all those other things. So those are the things that I do really like about him. He's got the experience as well. 25 starts with the Gamecocks. Had several starts as well at Oklahoma. Became the third highest, or put together the third highest passing yards total in South Carolina history in 2023. There's a lot that you can like about him, and there's a lot that is impressive. There are some things that he's got to work on as well, which is true for any draft prospect, but I don't think that it's enough stuff to work on, enough stuff to grow, that it's worth giving up on the idea that he can become more than just a backup quarterback at the next level. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go, which is way deeper of a video game or mobile game than I thought that it was. It is so much fun. And I know you're thinking, you've already talked about that, but look, there's so much more good stuff in this game than I've gotten the opportunity to look at, along with the timed tournaments where the more you win, the bigger prizes that you can get. There's also collectibles. I love collectibles in games. That's one of those things that keeps me really engaged. They've got unique stickers that you can trade and collect with your friends to complete albums for big prizes. They've also got cool playing pieces for you to travel the board on, all of that. So it's just new and exciting stuff every day in a constantly changing tournaments and challenges that include fun mini games like what are they called? Pachinko machines and stuff like that. Like, there's just so much stuff for you to find out with all the timed events and much more. There's just always something new and fun to discover on Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go and download it for free today at Google Play or on the App Store. Game on. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. It's not all roses, flowers, and rainbows when it comes to Spencer Rattler. There are some things that will need to be improved upon at the next level, but I'm excited to see him work with Andrew Janocko, who is a guy that has a reputation for being a fantastic quarterback coach and a bit of a genius over on the offensive side of the football to get those things improved. Let's take a look at some of the things that we'll need to see grow over the course of his time here in New Orleans. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Coming back tomorrow to take a look at first round selection, Taliesin Fuanga, to take a look at where it is that he fits, what it is that he needs to work on, what the expectation should be. We're going to do individual episodes on every single draft prospect. We'll look at every single undrafted free agent as well. And of course, keep you up to date with everything going on with free agency. Don't forget that later on today at 4 p.m. Eastern time, unrestricted free agents whose contracts expired from other teams no longer impact the compensatory formula when teams sign them. So this is a good time for a lot of teams to make a big, wide swath of moves at this point, especially knowing what needs still remain after the NFL draft. And the New Orleans Saints clearly still have some of those needs. Safety, unless they really like some of the undrafted free agent guys, which there are some undrafted free agent safeties that I really like. And of course, interior offensive line, wide receiver. There's a ton to look at. So we'll be keeping you up to date with all of those types of moves as well. Appreciate you as always for being here. And don't forget, if you want to look at film study, the Locked On Saints Insider Program, we do have that for you. 504-285-7473. Just text Who Dat to get started. $4.99 a month, free for the first 14 days. So that way, if you don't like it, you don't have to do anything. Otherwise, you buy me a cup of coffee, and it's super helpful, especially with the travel upcoming to California, which is all out of my own pocket. So make sure you check out the Insider Program if you're interested in that. You can also head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints, get some film study, help out the show. All right, so let's take a look at some of the places where there should be growth expected for Spencer Rattler, where he's going to have to show that growth in order to really enter that conversation of potential future quarterback for the New Orleans Saints or quarterback of the future for the New Orleans Saints. There are some things that he can't help, right? Being 6 foot, 211 pounds, I'll take that. It's better than sub 6 foot. I know I'm splitting hairs here, but it's better than sub 6 foot. There's a drastic difference between guys that are 6 foot and aren't 6 foot working in the NFL. And so I'll give him that. I do think that the big hands is a nice thing as well that kind of helps with all those things. But I think that, like, for the most part, the thing that I've noticed is that when it comes down to what he does as a scrambler, he tends to do the same thing. He likes to bail out to his right or bail out up the middle. Doesn't really work to his left very much. Makes sense. He's a right-handed quarterback, but it's almost like you know what he's going to do based upon what the pressure looks like and everything like that. Now he's got some good elusivity, all those other things, or elusiveness. I don't know if elusivity is a word. If it is, I made it up and it sounds great. But I think that can become a little bit predictable. So he's going to have to kind of vary up what it is that he does, allow himself to improv a little bit more. He's not as good a passer on the move as he is when he's on his base. That's not wildly surprising, but as a guy that can move, you would like to see him perform better when on the move. And some of that is because one of the reasons why he's a good passer on his base is because he settles in, has a wide base, has his throwing mechanic. I think at the next level, helping him figure out what his most advantageous throwing mechanics are on the move will end up helping him big time. So that's something that you'd like to see. Look, he didn't have the greatest offensive line over in South Carolina. He had a different starting five for 10 of 12 games during that. The New Orleans Saints offensive line hasn't proven to be the most steady either, right? So whether you're putting him behind a South Carolina offensive line or you're putting behind the New Orleans Saints offensive line, he's going to have to move, right? At least that's what we expect as of right now. We'll see if the O-line does take the steps forward. I certainly think that Taliese Fuanga helps a ton when it comes to that, but figuring things out in the new scheme, all of that could potentially help him there. But I think he's got to be able to show that he can deliver those passes a little bit more on the move. The other thing that was really interesting, and I'm going to pull this from Dane Brugler's report, that's super interesting to me, is that in 2023, there was a drastic split between what he looked like at home and on the road. I'm really curious to know what this was about. I'll ask him during rookie minicamps, but a 74.7% completion percentage with 20 total touchdowns thrown at home, right? 74.7%, 20 touchdowns. Compared to 59.3% completion percentage and 3 touchdowns thrown on the road. So there's a big difference in him playing at home and on the road, which didn't necessarily make sense. It's not like he was, I don't know, it's not like he was, he also played in Oklahoma, so he's played in a different environment before. I don't know, it's weird. It's a strange thing. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's really about him or if that's just about game situations or whatever. I'm not sure, but the New Orleans Saints carried the reputation for a long time of being a team that can only win at home, or that was much better at home and all those other things. I don't think you want to reprise that. However, I think Saints fans would rather them see better at home, so rather than look better at home than they've looked on the road. And that's not been the case here recently. They've been much worse at home than they've been on the road as of late. And so maybe actually that's a welcome change. But I just find that so interesting, and I wonder what that's all about. You want to see him continue to protect the football. Okay. A little bit kind of undisciplined with the football in 2022. Certainly had a little bit of that showed up at times in Norman as well when he was with Oklahoma. I think you want to see things continue with where they are. He brought that interception number down. The fumble number came down, but he did have 14 over the course of his 2 years in Norman, in South Carolina, along with 20 interceptions over those 2 years. So, but he got better in 2023 than he got in 2022. So you just want to see him continue to move in the right spot there when it comes to that. And that's going to be huge, right? That's going to be everything at the NFL level is, can you protect the football? Can you keep your team in games? Can you not turn the football over? All of that. Now, he didn't have much help when it came to offensive line at South Carolina. Certainly didn't have much help when it came to the run game. Got to see if the New Orleans Saints are going to be able to provide that for him. You provide that for him, then it doesn't force him to play hero ball. It doesn't force him to maybe put the ball in bad situations because you're able to move the ball otherwise. That wasn't always the case for South Carolina. The last thing that I'll mention is that, going back to sort of the maturation, the maturity kind of conversation and everything like that, is that I would like for him to keep the aggressive attitude, but continue to mature. And Jeff Ireland's talked about this before, that one of the reasons why teams do a lot of scouting early on throughout the process on players that might be outside of their range when they're drafting and stuff like that is because you never know when they're going to become available. So you scout everything and everybody. And so even if you're picking at 14 and a player is basically guaranteed to go number 1 overall, number 2 overall, Jaden Daniels, for instance, you still meet with them. The Saints still had a meeting with them, all those other things. you still want to keep that log because 4 years down the road, they could potentially become available. Reason why I bring that up is because one of the things that Jeff Ireland highlights about that is that typically the only thing that changes about them attitude-wise is that they mature, but their play style, what it is that they're good at, where it is that they've grown, those things typically remain the same. And then like the list of places where they've grown is what changes, right? The maturation, the maturity part of it, whether that's attitude maturity, whether that's play style maturity, whatever. I think that he's got to continue to show that. And he's got to prove that like this wasn't just 1 year of him getting comfortable in South Carolina and then changing his attitude once he gets to the next level and stuff like that. He's got to hold on to that. I kind of liked his reaction when he was drafted, where he was just like, yeah, cool. And just like kept it cool. Like he's got a very calm, cool demeanor on the field, unless he's talking trash. And so as long as he can keep that, I think that's going to be the other thing. He can't take steps backwards. So maybe this isn't a growth thing. This is more of a maintenance thing, but he can't take steps backwards in terms of the maturation process. And I feel pretty comfortable about the New Orleans Saints and the ability to keep that from happening, but certainly something he has to police in himself as well. So all surmountable stuff, all things that Andrew Janocko, who is, a crown jewel type guy in the NFL from a quarterback coaching perspective, should be able to address. So not only do we have to look at Spencer Rattler's ability to develop, but the New Orleans Saints sort of increased expectation in terms of their ability to develop him has to work as well. So those are things that I think you're looking at to grow when it comes to Spencer Rattler. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're taking a look at Taliese Fuanga. We're also going to keep you up to date on any potential moves for free agency, all those other things, but much more on the way, breaking down all of the draft prospects and more from this year's class. If you want film study, once again, the Locked On Saints Insider Group, you can find a link in the description of this episode. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSaints. You can also just text Who Dat to 504-285-7473. Appreciate you very much as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. You're probably going to want to go and check out Jake Madison later on tonight when he goes live after the Pelicans game. Just saying. Could be a lot of fun over at Locked On Pelicans. Appreciate you as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.